So welcome Bhaskar on our platform and many congratulations for a very unconventional book, I must say, which has been published by Garudabooks, The Imperishable Seed. Extremely delighted to welcome you on our 110th episode under Trends Literature series. And it is being hosted by me and Dia right now. And I request everyone to please subscribe to our channel Trends Literature series and press the bell icon. And you can easily see all our earlier author interactions, and also you can get the notifications for the future as well. Our guest author is Mr. Bhaskar Kamble today. He's a physicist, he's a data scientist, and he's also the author of the book with a very, very impressive name, as I just said, The Imperishable Seed. This book has been published by Garuda and talks about how Hindu mathematics changed the world and why the history was erased. So Bhaskar, in fact, to briefly introduce him, he wears many hats, but he's a PhD in theoretical condensed matter physics from IIT Kanpur and has been a researcher at Ruhr University, Germany. Welcome, Bhaskar, on our platform. It's such a pleasure to see you today. And you're joining in all the way from Berlin.
Thank you very much, Neeta ji, for having me on the show.
To start with, I would really be interested to know about this very, very unusual title that your book has. How and why, and why did you feel the need to write on Indian mathematics? In fact, I must tell everyone that the book is definitely a must read for history of science and mathematics. And definitely, it's quite readable. It has an engaging style and definitely a lucid narrative. Over to you, Bhaskar.
Thank you, Neeta ji. So once again, thanks for having me on the show, and I'm really honored. So there are like two questions you asked. One was about the title, and one was about why I felt the need for writing this book. Maybe I start with the first. Maybe I start with the second question. Yeah, why I felt the need for writing the book. So we always think that, at least many of us think, I was no exception, that mathematics comes from ancient Greece and from Europe later times. There is nothing else that we hear about it. So we all end up believing that maths is just Greek and European invention, and there is nothing else, no other people contributed to it. And with India, we have always this impression that it's a backward land, it is full of superstitions, and it needed the help of the West for its emancipation. And this was the kind of thing that I grew up with. And India was connected with caste system, Hinduism, Hindu society is specifically was regressive and everything. This is what we heard. And but later on, I started becoming a little bit more aware of the history of Indian mathematics, and I started seeing that actually a lot of the mathematics that we study in school, almost all of it, in fact, you take arithmetic, algebra, permutations and combinations, trigonometry, and even calculus, they all come from the Hindu mathematics heritage. And I was really surprised at the sort of my own ignorance, and I really thought that this is not right, that people don't know about it. And so I started becoming more, I started writing more about this topic on my blog. And over the years, as my interest in the subject grew, I collected more and more information, and ultimately it took the form of this book. So the aim of this book is that I wanted to show the achievements of the Hindu heritage of mathematics. That is one thing, of course. But the other thing was that I wanted to also emphasize the deep connections of this mathematical knowledge and its with the Hindu philosophical framework, the Hindu knowledge framework. So and because no knowledge arises in a vacuum, there has to be a sort of environment around it to make that possible. And I saw that a lot of this mathematics had deep connections with the Hindu philosophical framework, with, for example, with the way the Paramatma is conceived, as opposed to the God of Christianity or Islam. So these sort of things I wanted to emphasize. This was the second aim of the book, and this is where this the Imperishable Seed, the title, comes in. So it's like. I just come to that in a moment. But before that, I wanted to also mention the third aim of the book. That is that I was surprised at my own ignorance about about the heritage of Hindu civilization regarding mathematics and science and knowledge, and I was so surprised, and I really wanted to understand why don't people know about this? What are the factors that make people so ignorant about this, and what are the factors at play, historical reasons that has eclipsed this from the public consciousness? So these are some of the things I have addressed in the book. And one more thing, I want to make it also clear what I mean by the word Hindu. Hindu means not the religion Hinduism. Hinduism is a part of the Hindu civilization, yes, but it also encompasses the Hindu civilization, which includes what is today Pakistan or Bangladesh. And in fact, Indian universities like Takshashila, they were in former Pakistan, for example. And I did not use a word, and this also includes different streams of thoughts like the Jain school or the Buddhist scholars. This includes all that. It is not just the so-called Vedic thing. And yeah, and the reason is that the other reason is that I did not use the word Indian mathematics, is that India is a specific political entity which was bought in 1947, and which it excludes what is today Pakistan, Bangladesh, etc. Yeah, these are some of the things. And coming to the title, The Imperishable Seed, this is, in fact, if when you read the book, you will see that it is closely connected to the ideas of algebra. So, so in fact, it's a little bit tricky to explain this everything here. But in algebra, the idea is that you use symbols like X, Y, Z to denote unknowns or to denote certain mathematical relations. And this is a huge revolutionary idea. And it was the Hindu mathematicians like Brahmagupta, Aryabhatta, who did this for the first time in the history of mathematics. It's not Al-Khwarizmi, it's not the Arab mathematicians as we are told. This technique of using the symbol for unknown or for a relation comes from India. And this is a very revolutionary technique, because it's sort of, in a symbol with this relation like a square plus b square equal to c square, it's like, you include all the possible right angle triangles in just one single formula. So it's like in Hindu philosophy, there is the concept of Vyakta and Avyakta. So from the Avyakta comes the entire Vyakta, the whole universe. So these are some of the things. I have explained this in more detail in the book, but this is the basic explanation.
Amazing research work. So how long did it take you to write this book? I mean, it has such a, I would say, intense content. I mean, there's so much that you've written, and I'm sure there would have been so much of research that you did. So how many years that you took?
Yeah. When I started reading about Indian mathematics sometime in 2012, and I would read seriously, quite seriously, in bouts, in certain phases, So and then there would be long gaps of inactivity. I would be busy with other things, stuff like job and everything. But I think it's sometime since 2014 till 2019 or so. I think the bulk of the book was written. So in 5 years' time, with several gaps in between.
You have a lot of people who've been recommending this book, and you've got a lot of guidance also from Mr. Sakran Sahu and so many scholars, and plus your inputs. And the book has really, I'm sure it is reaching out far and wide, and a lot of school children definitely will also gain from this. This book definitely, as Subhash Kak says in your book, who's the professor with Oklahoma University, and he says that it definitely shakes people out of the incorrect colonialist narratives, which we have regarding Indian mathematics. This book also discusses many of the key concepts of modern mathematics, which originated in the Hindu civilization. So please do elaborate on the legacy of mathematics in Indian civilization. As per the book, it is definitely a scholarly work in decolonizing the legacy of mathematics.
Yeah, it's a huge amount of work that it is a huge amount of mathematics that has come from the Hindu civilization. Zero number systems. We know that arithmetic, the whole idea of arithmetic, and in fact, this is so trivial for us. It's so trivial, adding numbers, multiplying numbers. But in fact, it is not. You have to remember that it took Europe about a few centuries before they started getting used to it and started using these ideas. So it is not in the least trivial. And this whole thing with algebra that I just mentioned, it's a revolutionary idea using symbols. Then even I mean, no one did that before the Indians. The Greeks did not do that, and then maybe it is said to some extent maybe Diophantus did that, but so like not to the extent that the Indians did. And then you have algebra, then you have trigonometry. Everything that we study in trigonometry in school is actually comes from India. So the ideas of sine and cosine, even the words terms sine and cosine, they come from India. In Sanskrit they are known as jya and kotigya. So and they are defined exactly in the same way as they are done today, with some minor differences which I will not go into right now. There are some technical differences. And this whole relations, sine of a plus b is sine a cos b plus cos a sine b, and same this cosine of a plus b is cos a cos b minus sine a sine b. So these all these relations we study, they come from India. The trigonometric circle, then and in fact, yeah, as I said, the words jia and kotigya, they traveled to Arabia, where they were translated as jaib, and jaib was mistranslated into Latin as fold, which in Latin is sinus, and so that becomes sine. So the jia becomes sine. And then you have combinatorics, permutations and combinations. Then you have the subject of linguistics. Panini in the 500 BC or 400 BC, Panini, he wrote the Ashtadhyayi, whose work on linguistics produced a huge impact on Europe. Then you have Pingala, whose works on prosody is like these contain. He was the first to propose not propose, but to describe the binary number system in the context of prosody, of course, but it's the same that we use today. So using two symbols to denote numbers. And then the idea of Fibonacci sequence, which is everywhere today, also comes from India. So so this was explicitly described by Halayudha, Virahanka at least 50 years before Fibonacci was born. And then you have calculus. We believe that calculus was independently discovered by Newton and Leibniz in 17th, 18th centuries. But the truth is that many of these ideas, the basic ideas, were developed in Kerala, and in fact, it has a long history going back to Aryabhatta. This history of calculus. So the historical continuity from the time of Aryabhatta till the Kerala mathematicians in the 14th, 15th centuries. And many people, of course, don't know about it. But like for example, Professor C.K. Raju has written on it extensively in his books, Cultural Foundations of Mathematics, how calculus traveled from India to Europe via the Jesuit priests. And yeah, this would be some of the things. Astronomy, of course, yeah, astronomy also. Indian mathematicians were astronomers, many of them, and this astronomy also went over to Arabia. So, for example, Al-Khwarizmi, he was a mathematician as well as an astronomer. He just basically used the works of Brahmagupta and Aryabhatta, and he put them into his own words. His books on arithmetic and algebra, and his works on astronomy. He took the Indian tables, astronomical tables, and used them. So these are some of the things that I can very quickly summarize about the legacy of Indian mathematics.
So very right. I think over to Dia, you will like to take it forward now.
Yes. So like you mentioned, introduction of algebra, in fact, has been like nothing less than a revolution in history. And you also mentioned in your book that how many of innovations in mathematics played a key role in the development of subjects such as computer science and modern linguistics, which forms the base of our existence right now, how the modern world works, which is quite interesting. So would you like to spend some time explaining more of this?
Yeah, sure. So there were 2 points. Like one you mentioned was with algebra, and the other one you mentioned was with computer science, right? Linguistics. Yeah,
yes.
yeah. So with algebra, one can algebra is like we use it. It's one cannot do without it. We learn it in school, X, Y, Z, and all that. So this was pioneered by the Indian mathematicians. And if you look at Bhaskara in his book Bijaganita, he writes a very beautiful verse on what algebra is, Bijaganita is. So he it's like his verse is like avyakta, vyakta. He says that avyakta means the symbols and vyakta means the specific numbers, and he beautifully has a double meaning encoded in this verse. Like avyakta also would mean the divinity or Paramatma, and the vyakta would mean the the specific instances which come out of the divinity. And then then they were really they did really also advanced stuff, like linear equations in one variable, two variables, multiple variables, quadratic equations. This is elementary stuff which we all learn in school. Then also they did very interesting stuff like the Kutaka algorithm, then the Chakravala algorithm, which is today known as the Pell's equation, which was supposedly first solved by Fermat in the 17th century. But later on, people came to know that it was done by Jayadeva and Bhaskara centuries earlier. So, and then you have to also remember that even Al-Khwarizmi, who is considered to be the inventor of algebra, he never used symbols. He used everything in words. So there was no single instance of using a symbol in his works. So this is really revolutionary, the idea of this algebra. And then when we, for example, come to the subjects of linguistics and computer science, linguistics has a very long history. In this, Panini's Ashtadhyayi in the 400 to 500 BCE, and when this was introduced to Europe, I think in the 19th century by some German Indologists, it really started the whole study of linguistics in Europe through this, and for a long time. And Panini's work Ashtadhyayi is really revolutionary because not just he gives rules for constructing grammatically meaningful sentences or phrases, but he gives in about 4,000 rules, every possible grammatical language, phrase that you can construct, every meaningful, like not every phrase is meaningful, but like from his rules one can construct every meaningful phrase. So this was used for a long time by NLP researchers, natural language processing, for doing research in this. And when you think of computer programming is done in a language which has to be as close as possible to a human language. So in this sense, there is some the ideas of linguistics also become relevant. So there is something known as the Bacchus-Naur form in computer programming, which was actually developed by Panini in 500 BC. So and then you have a host of mathematicians like Charles Babbage, then George Boole, who were influenced by Hindu logic and mathematics because they were close friends with an Indologist called H.T. Colebrook. Colebrook was the one who introduced Europe to Indian mathematics and Indian logic systems, and his wife, George Boole's wife, she writes in a letter that how Babbage, Boole, etc., they were really influenced by Indian mathematics and logic systems. And so and then if you look at the works of Noam Chomsky, who was a linguist in the 20th century, I think he's still alive. Probably still alive. I don't remember, but yeah, his works also are influenced by the Sanskrit ideas, by the ideas of Panini. So and then a host of other mathematicians, which yeah. Then, if you look at the works of, as I said, the binary system also originated in the works of Pingala, in his works of Prosody, where he was enumerating different meters, poetic meters, and permutations, combinations also play a huge role in sort of these sort of things. And I think, this would be a summary of most of the things, unless I forgotten something. But yeah.
Sir, I have to say it is amazing how much knowledge you hold, and that obviously can be seen in this very extremely well-researched book. In fact, a unique feature of the book is that several mathematical results are given in the original Sanskrit along with the explanations, so that the reader is taken directly to the source. Was this intentionally done for this purpose?
Yes, indeed, yes. Because today, in the age of the internet, it's one sees on Twitter everywhere that the Indians did this, they solved this equation, they did that, and everything. But one does not, it does not really click with us, at least with me, because okay, they did this, but you don't really get that feeling of how they did it, and it's a little bit like it does not get you the flavor of how they did it, the whole thing. So I really wanted to also see it in the original Sanskrit, and so that I can then give the reader a flavor, a feeling of the original to the context in which it was created. And this also, for people who know Sanskrit, this is also an advantage, because then they can make connections with the deeper philosophical system and the knowledge system of the Hindu civilization. So I think it really makes it more interesting than just reading about it in English that they did this and they did that.
Definitely, there's no doubt about it. It is very interesting. I mean, I've been reading the book right now, and it's taken my interest. The book also discusses the reasons why the tradition of Hindu mathematics came to an end and why most people do not know about it in today's world. This is an important part of the book, and we have discussed this in part. So, would you like to throw some light on it? And I know you mentioned it in detail in chapter 12.
Sure. I mean, there is one of the most important reasons was, in fact, the church. The reason the church was in the starting from about the 13th century or so, the church started studying, like ascribing everything to the ancient Greeks, Euclid, Archimedes, and so on. So this was, of course, one reason. And if you look at the original evidences for Euclid, Archimedes, you find that it's really very shaky. So one great historian of mathematics, David Fowler, he has written on how the text of Euclid has passed through so many editions and so many people who have edited them, and in the present form it is, you don't know how much connection it has with the original way in which it was conceived in supposedly in 300 BCE. This was one thing. The church was there, so it had this. The Christianity has this. At least the church has this antipathy towards so-called pagan cultures, and but unfortunately, the pagan cultures, they had a lot of knowledge, like the Hindu civilization, and so they were in need of this knowledge because, for example, the church wanted to have a better calendar because of the date of Easter. I think this was, by the in time of Christoph Clavius. 16th, 17th centuries. Then, and at the same time, Europe was becoming more and more imperialistic. It was it needed navigational skills, so they were in need of this knowledge. But at the same time, the church cannot admit that if we want to convert other people, then how can we admit that they have good knowledge? So that has to be hidden. Then comes the European imperialist powers who then the rise of colonialism. And so, for example, if the British want to rule over India, Indians must never know about their heritage. So of course, then they teach a totally wrong history to brainwash the people about because the people should believe that they need the British for being saved, this sort of a thing. So then this also gets buried, and then there are other factors like India suffered for many centuries under Islamic rule. I mean, it was like absolutely brutal invasions, violence. We know that it's horrifying. So, of course, in such a scenario, all this heritage got destroyed, and it moved south, and it survived in the form of the Kerala mathematicians. And then this would be a few factors and of course, I have written that in more detail in the book. So it would be then, yeah.
Yes, sir. I was actually coming to that you have mentioned that high school students, it's very important for them to know that the most of the mathematics that they study, it in fact comes from India itself. So, and it's very important for them to know their heritage. So if you could elaborate more in detail and maybe talk about things that you think could be done and how it should be done.
This is a very nice point because whenever I speak about this to some people or I see some conversations, one very typical response is, why are you stuck in the past? You may have done these things in the past. What are you doing today? Dunya chand pe pahunch gayi hai, and you are stuck in the past. This kind of things we get to hear so many times. So this is a very wrong way of thinking because because if like your whole identity, your whole history is still comes from somebody else, from the West, from the British, who imposed their history on you. How are you ever going to do anything independent, anything original, if your whole identity comes from you, if you have not taken the trouble to understand yourself, your own heritage, your own civilization? So you can forget about doing anything original or anything useful. You will just keep on copying the West and being stuck in an endless cycle of copying. So this is for example really important. That's why that Indians should be in touch with their heritage and know about it. And secondly, so there is a very huge psychological factor. So when I was growing up, when I was a student in school, when I was learning, geometry, Pythagoras theorem, this came from the Greeks, and then later on calculus, Newton, Leibniz, and I was like, really a little bit like in awe of the Westerners, of the Western mathematicians. And I thought that, oh man, these guys are really so smart. And I mean, like, it's all mathematics is basically a foreign subject. And only later when I came to realize that it's actually many of these ideas, if not all, many of these ideas, they were part of, my own civilization. And if I had known this as a student, then I would have felt a totally different relation to these subjects, and I would have felt not this awe, but this belongingness, and that it's not something foreign, but it's something which is in part of me, so to speak. And that would have made such a huge difference, and that will make a huge difference to many students when they come to know about these two things.
Absolutely, I totally agree. And come to think of it, you're sitting in Germany and you're writing such a fantastic book. And I'm sure the current generation and the future generation is really going to learn a lot from your book, especially about, there's so many people who are fond of mathematics, but with this book, they come to know how much of origin, how much we are related to the mathematics that they say is maybe belongs to Greeks or some international mathematicians. Ultimately, most of it is ours. So, there have been doubts on the methodology and also the proof that there's not been much proof earlier that Indian mathematics has played such important role. Your book counters that. You have ample proof in that. So in the end, perhaps you would like to touch upon something that we have not really discussed here. And I must tell everyone, it's best that you read the book. There's so many aspects, 15 chapters of pure magic in there. So you must read it. It's been published by Garuda Prakashan. And maybe last words from you on the book and perhaps something that you would like to know.
Yeah, sure. So there is a huge So one of the distortions that Western historians of mathematics have been carrying on is that the Indian mathematicians, they had a faulty methodology. They were not very much concerned with proof. They were just they would make vague statements, and they would not be very clear in their statements. I mean, this of course totally bunkum. I mean, in the sense that if they had supposedly an inferior methodology, then you have to how could they come up with a number system centuries before Europe? How could they come up with calculus centuries before Europe? This is of course totally bunkum. These claims unfortunately have stayed on in popular history for these years, and it is actually. I mean, so some of the reasons for this is, of course, intentional, intentional distortions by Western historians for whatever reasons. But some of the reasons are also genuine misunderstandings. So, because they are not familiar with the way the Sanskrit texts are written. So, what happens is very often is that some Aryabhata, for example, I take the example of Aryabhata. He has written the Aryabhatiya. It's a very concise text, and it is just a collection of sutras. That is to say, things which you can easily memorize and keep in and remember. So it is not at all bothered with elaborations or proofs or not even proofs, but it's not just collection of results. And what happens is that many disciples of these mathematicians, they write commentaries, tika on these works, and in the process they elaborate more on these results. They like they can give proofs of these results, and they do very often, and they do new work in the process. And so you have to look at the whole body. So, but what many historians have done is that they have looked at just the original treatises, like for example Aryabhatiya, and then concluded that okay, there is no proof in Indian mathematics. So this is of course totally wrong. And for example, Bhaskara too, in the 12th century, he writes about the reasons, like why proof is important. For example, a mathematician has to justify his statements, otherwise he will not be taken seriously by other mathematicians, and this sort of, so it's like well established. So these are some of the things that that I would say in this topic.
Fantastic. I must show everyone the book. This is the book that we're talking about. Wonderful cover, wonderful graphics, very attractive, and equally attractive inside. So thank you, Bhaskar, for joining in from Berlin for this very, very special conversation. This means a lot to us. And thank you for this wonderfully written book, which not only talks about facts about ancient Indian mathematics, but also analyzes how it flowed naturally from the central philosophy and thought process of Indian society. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Neeta. It was great.